Welcome to the Meat and Potatoes Podcast. We're here with Brad Hall, who is the managing director of Hall & Company. How are you, Brad?
I'm very well, thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time to join. We're going to talk about an interesting topic today, but set the table with your kind of career experience and how you've become a subject matter expert in this.
I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. Psychology looks at human behavior of whatever, in schools, school psychology, et cetera, and organizational psychology looks at it at work. So organization behavior, organization psychology, same thing. I did my PhD dissertation in Japanese companies. Can they manage globally? Can they manage non-Japanese? The answer is no. They never could, and they still can't. But that's what I did. And so I was, I was through consulting. I was the head of organization effectiveness for the McDonald's Corporation a long time ago. I went to Japan with AT&T as vice president in Japan Telecom, one of their acquisitions. So I was the only non-Japanese person, in the company, and they used to put me on the front of all of the Japan Telecom propaganda. And they used to call me the White Tiger. That's why people go to the zoo to see the White Tiger. So right. I looked international, and so, but that was great. And then I went to IBM Asia Pacific, where I was in charge of leadership and organization effectiveness for about 60,000 people in 19 countries in Asia, and I loved that. And then I went to ABN AMRO Bank, which was 19th largest bank in the world. I was senior vice president of talent for that. And then most recently, I've been with Huawei. It's a huge Chinese company. It's the Chinese company. It is the Chinese company. It's about when I left, it was about $145 billion. So it's about double the size of Boeing. And I was the senior advisor to the head of HR for Huawei. It was about 300,000 people when I left. So that's my story.
Yeah. Well, with groups that big, it's probably good to have a PhD in industrial psychology.
That's correct.
Because anyone running their own lives, let alone small families or organizations, knows how hard it is.
Yeah.
And there's a science and an art to it, and you've kind of dedicated your life to understanding that. I can't imagine 300,000 people.
It's infinitely complex. If you're a pediatrician and the mom comes in and she says, my son has an earache, and you say, here's the pink stuff, or it comes in and they say, well, you got a cold, just go away. It's not that complex for the most part, but when you have that many people with that many different ideas, it is infinitely complex. This person hates that person, or they've had different experiences, or
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It makes my head spin most of the time, quite honestly.
I can imagine. So yeah, infinitely complex, managing people, big organizations and small organizations. You have all the different personas, personalities, tough to account for all of that. So ultimately, first question would be, what does HR do?
That's a great question. That's the most basic question. I think HR does two things, and I think they're almost two professions. One is they do the administrative work for the organization. They do payroll, they do employee records. Harry pinches Sally, what do you do about that? And that's what most HR people do, and that's why most people go into HR, to provide service. And it's necessary. Now, it doesn't create a lot of value for the corporation, doesn't increase revenues, it doesn't increase external customer satisfaction. The second thing that HR does is it improves the performance of the organization. If you think about Microsoft or any of the Silicon Valley companies, quite honestly, they're mostly just leased buildings and human beings. They're not big manufacturing plants. They don't have a special competitive advantage for real estate or access to capital, et cetera. They're just people and buildings. And so the only way to really improve the performance of these companies is through people. Well, who would do that? The strategy department? No. The operations department? No. They know their profession, but they don't know how to systematically improve the value of the human capital. And so that's the second part of what HR should be doing, but rarely does.
Yeah. And so for key measurements for a well-run HR department, what would some of those be?
Well, so if you're saying that, human capital, that's a big high level thing. What do you mean human capital? Well, I say that what you want is you want your people to outperform your competitors' people, right? So at Microsoft, our software engineers are better than Google software engineers, and when they are, we win. So to do that, you have to have the right DNA. You have to utilize that DNA. When I was at Huawei, we had the best talent in the world coming from foreign companies. We had the CIO of the UK come, and but if you don't utilize that correctly, there's no value at all. So you need to have the right talent. You need to utilize that right talent in pursuit of business objectives, right? So how do you do that? Coming back to your measures, there are, I call them critical success factors. This was an old Harvard Business Review article on critical success factor. Critical success factor for life satisfaction. Well, you have to have money. You have to have a good job. You have a lot of money, but you hate your job 50 hours a week. Life's no good. You have good money. You have a good job. You don't have health. You got nothing. You got to have friends and family. If you have 4 of those critical success factors, you're probably going to be happy. But it's multiplicative. A 0 on any one of them equals 0, right? So what are the 4 critical success factors, or 5 for human capital? Number 1 would be effective executive teams. Because if mom and dad aren't happy, nobody's happy, right? The second one, and the measure would be, are your executive teams better than they were last year? Well, how would you know that? Well, a long time ago, I was at IBM, and my partner was the president of IBM Semiconductor. And he says, Brad, you've taken us out and we've done these executive things. Are we better than we were when we started? And I said, man, I'm really embarrassed that I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And he said, well, don't worry about it, Brad. Let's think about this. He says, well, why do we have an executive team? I said, that's a good place to start. And he says, I think we have it because of 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons. And he says, now, reason number 1, what would that look like at level 1 and level 2 and level 3, right? And so you can see the matrix in your mind. And so what we would do then is every 6 months, we would say, okay, here's the first one. Are we level 1, 2, or 3? We just ask the team, and they would tell us. And we know if we're getting better, right?
Yeah.
Number 1 is effective executive teams. Number 2 is leaders that produce results. The only way to measure leadership is sustained business results. And if you think of Steve Jobs, he's a crazy man. I wouldn't want to work for that guy. Is he a great leader? Yeah. Or Elon Musk or whomever. They might be crazy people, and they might have terrible competency profiles, or they'll have spiky competency profiles, right?
Right.
But they're the great leaders. So, but what we do in HR is we always talk about competencies, and we have leadership classes on competencies. Drive to achieve. Are you going to send me to a drive to achieve class, and in 2 days I'm going to have a better achievement motivation? You buy competencies. You don't build competencies. So number 1 is effective executive teams. Number 2 is leaders that create business results. Number 3 is key position excellence. What is that? Well, a key position are the most important positions for your organization. Do you remember MCI, the telephone company?
Yeah.
Right? We did a project with them many years ago, and MCI moved their headquarters to Washington, D.C. Why? Because their whole strategy was suing AT&T to be able to use their lines for free. And that's what they did. So their key position was lawyers to sue people.
Yeah.
But for the most part, a key position would be, I was at McDonald's, head of McDonald's organization effectiveness. Every McDonald's is exactly the same. It's the same food. It's the same business layout, store layout, the same POP. Everything's the same. The only difference is a store manager. So if you take a store manager from a failing store and you move him a mile down the street if you take a store manager from a great store, you move him 5 miles down the street to a failing store, that store will be better in 30 days every single time, because the key position at McDonald's is the store manager. If the store manager's right, you don't need a lot of regional managers. You don't need a regional finance and regional marketing. They say, just leave me alone. So number one is effective executive teams. Number two is leaders that develop results. Number three is key position excellence. Are our store managers better than Burger King store managers? Are our salespeople better than the bad guys' salespeople? Yes or no? And you can know that because you do surveys to customers, and you say, well, who has the best sales force, us or the other guys? So it's easy to know that. And the last one is building a high-performance organization. Now, you can get measurements on each of these things, each of those three things, and that's what I would do for the strategic part of HR. Long answer to your question. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's very good and insightful, and a few of the things you mentioned are common sense.
They're all common sense, aren't they? Yes. They're all common sense, yeah.
But it seems like over your career, you've been caught off guard even with just basic common sense questions, which just help you formulate your theory and strategy.
Here's the thing. When I go, I'm at AT&T, IBM, and I go into semiconductors, I'm over into IBM PC or whatever, and I talk to mostly CFOs, quite honestly, and I start talking, and they hate me. The second I walk in the door, they hate me because I'm from HR.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take more than 5-10 minutes where I'm their best friend, because they realize their biggest cost is labor, and nobody is doing anything about improving the quality and the performance of the labor. So, and what they'll say is, well, obviously, it's common sense. Well, it is common sense.
Yeah. So, an example of how that would work, you're meeting somebody new, CFO.
Yep.
They hate you. 5 minutes later, they're seeing the
best friend.
Light. What might they say? Like, find me 4 more people like Stephanie. Find me 5 more people like me. And then what would you do after that?
So what I've learned and what I would tell them, and, it's kind of bold, but I would say I never accept a request like, this is the problem. Because almost always they're going to say the problem is either compensation or performance management or training. Those are the 3 problems. And almost always the problem is them. And so what you can't do is you can't accept something from a business manager says, here's the problem, here's the answer, and you need to go fix it. See, if administrative HR is a service organization, and they see their customers as the business managers, I say the customer is the customer. The business manager is my partner. We together are going to solve a problem, and I'm going to solve a problem to help that person. So let me go identify the problem before I go running off and getting somebody like Stephanie, right?
Yeah. And so you go off and start to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Framework, methodology, is it the same playbook that you follow each time, or how does it differentiate?
It never is. I always tell people I've never done the same thing twice. And it's good and it's bad. I feel like what do I know how to do? But let me give you an example of this problem. I was at Huawei. I was there for the first week, and I went into the CEO's office, and he said, Brad, we're having problems in Europe. The Europeans are quitting. They don't like working for a Chinese company. They want career paths and training. So you need to go to Germany and give them career paths and training. And so stay there for 6 months, fix it. And I said, Ken, it was his American or English name, Huho Kun is his name, but I said, Ken, I just joined Huawei. I don't know sales at Huawei. I don't know what's going on in Europe, but I can promise you it's not career paths and training. Well, you don't say that in China because the managers are the emperors. You don't question the emperor. So he kind of rolls his eyes, and I said, give me 2 months, and I'm going to come back here and tell you what the problem is and how to fix it. All right, you hired you, American guy, you'll go do it. So we get over to Germany, and because that was the headquarters of Western Europe, and we start with Germany, actually. And I find that what's happening is the Chinese are there, and they're trying to be the nicest people they can and not create any cultural problems over there. They're trying so hard to be nice. But they feel more comfortable with the Chinese. And so they live in the same dorms. They go and eat together, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. On the weekends, they have no family, so they hang out together. And they don't want to ruffle any feathers. And so when they do have meetings, they're not good meetings, and nobody really knows what happened at the end. So let's just say it was a good meeting, and you say, okay, we're going to do X and Y and Z for the customer. So this would be a sales team, the Deutsche Telekom. They're going to Deutsche. There's 15 people on Huawei that are going to go to Deutsche Telekom, right? And half of them are Europeans, and half of them are Chinese. They decide on Friday what they're going to do. The Chinese go and hang out together all weekend long, and they change the plans because they think of better ideas. They get there on Monday. The Chinese go left. The Europeans go right. And everybody hates each other. That's the problem. It's not career paths and cultural training. I mean, it's that nobody called a play. If we're going to go see the customer, what's the play? There's a play that's relationship building. There's a play that's solving a customer problem. There's a play that's selling something. Those are different teams with different roles, just like a play in football would be. Everybody's got to know their position. They didn't, and so they're always fighting. And that's why people were leaving. So when I came back, that's an example of don't trust what they tell you.
Okay. That's a great story and a great example. So that required, obviously, a lot of expertise on your part and a lot of observation.
Yes.
And probably boots on the ground was the most important thing there.
Just talking to a lot of people. When I was a young consultant, I remember coming back from an interview at Baxter Healthcare, and I said, I don't know what to do. And the partner who was in the car with me said, I don't know what to do either. But you have to, if you collect data, enough data, you start putting a piece of the puzzle in. And when you have enough of the pieces, you say, oh, I know what that puzzle is. It's a picture of whatever. And it becomes very easy.
Yeah.
But you have to collect the data.
So when you went back to the boss at Huawei,
yeah,
what did you communicate?
I told him, I said, the reason that there is conflict, lots of conflict there, is because the assumptions are wrong, are different. So let's just say that we're a sales team, and your assumption is profit, and so you're going to say, let's increase the cost as much as possible. And I'm going to say, and my assumption is it's market share. And I'm going to say, let's lower the cost as much as possible. And everything that I do, every phone call that I take, every way I use my voice is about how to reduce a cost. And you're thinking, Brad, are you the stupidest person in the entire world? It's not that I'm stupid. It's because our assumptions are different. And once you get below that level of conflict, and you look at the assumptions and you line up the assumptions, that conflict just goes away.
Yeah.
So
was it well received?
It was well received. Yeah.
And
because it was obvious.
Pretty obvious.
Right.
Not on the same page. So then well received. What were your marching orders after that?
Well, then we went back and so what we did, it was really cool. We had a large table. We had, the 15 people on the team, and Accenture had just been there for 2 years designing the sales process. It was called lead to cash, from a market lead to money, right? Every step on the way, lead to cash. And then it was like 1,000 pages, quite honestly. And then they just sent it. They emailed it to everybody. Well, obviously, nothing happened. Nobody knew what lead to cash was, but they knew they better follow it or they're going to get fired. But how can you know? So we put the lead to cash, and I said there are 7 basic lead to cash steps. Anybody at this table decide that those are wrong? And did we miss anything? They go, no, actually, they're really quite good. Okay, so we all agree. Yeah. Okay, let's go to number 1. There are 7 subpoints of this. Who does number 1? Garrett does it. Garrett says, I do it? Does everybody think Garrett does it? Yeah, Garrett, they think you do it. All right, I'll do it. But you have to give this to me. You know, you have to communicate with me. Garrett, what do you mean communicate? Do you want a note every week? Do you want a phone call every month? What do you mean communicate? You tell us what we mean. Everybody going to do that for Garrett? Yeah. Garrett, what do you want from these guys? You know, so I mean, these guys, what do you want from Garrett, etc. And we write it down, and then we go to the next step, and we go to the next step. And at the end of it, everybody signs the document. This is how we're going to run the team. Is it going to work? Of course it's going to work. Of course it's going to work. It's obvious, right? So that's what we did. And then when we're done and we have this book of exactly how we're going to perform this, you know, as a team, I come back every 2 months and say, okay, let's go through it again. What's working, what's not working? Maybe we got it wrong. Or maybe we didn't get it wrong, but you guys are too lazy or whatever. I don't know what, but let's fix it. And then the 3 leaders of the team, you have the salesperson, you have the installation basic person, and you have the customer service person. Those people go to the customer and they say, this is how we're going to serve you. And the customer says, wow, if you're going to do that, then we need to change our organization. And now we have a business partnership. Now all of a sudden HR is improving the revenue of a company and customer satisfaction and partnering through human capital. That's what HR should do.
There you go. And how long did it take to start to see results?
Immediately, yeah. I mean, the customers are thrilled. And the other thing that I think is really, really important, the most important perhaps, is do you send them to a training class on how to be, you know, sales theory, sales excellence theory or something? No. What we did in going through that step by step, what do you do? What do you do? And how do you do that? That is the best training that they will ever have, because they sit there and they fight over each one of these things. They're fighting over their assumptions, and they're aligning assumptions step by step by step. So that's real training, not sending you to a class.
Yeah. We won't get to all of these questions.
No, I know.
It's very fun and enlightening. You've worked with big companies, with big problems. But a lot of these principles apply to startups as well.
100%.
And so not every startup can pick your brain, right? On their own, what would be some like key core principles that they could apply early on that would make it so that their organization runs efficiently or their HR department is proactive and adds to the bottom line?
Yeah, you know, I think about this, and I think for a smaller company, you know, focusing on the administrative parts of HR, people have to get paid. I mean, if they don't get paid, then it doesn't matter what all that other stuff is. So maybe you focus on that, and then you outsource the strategic stuff, because you're not going to get a person who can do both. And so I don't know. I guess that's where I'm going. But I think that the foundation would be. The foundation starts with probably what are the key positions, and can we make our key positions better this year or next year than they are this year? Can you do that, and how would you do that? So those are the kind of things. I mean, I'd be happy to share this with the community over time. We don't have time today, but we were actually thinking of, you know, I think a lot of the CEOs of, I don't know, like I'm guessing, of small tech companies don't have the background for big companies and things. And even if they do have the background for big companies don't do a good job anyway, for the most part. So helping the CEOs of these companies decide how are they going to organize themselves, and how do department meetings run? How does that department, how did marketing and sales, they are always fighting. When the organization is not running like a well-oiled machine with interchangeable parts, there's going to be conflict, just like there's friction in an engine.
Mm-hmm.
And the CEOs are going to, and the COOs, whatever, are going to be spending their entire days fighting the friction. And, making the engine smooth is just, it's everything. So deciding what does the engine look like, we call that a business operating model. What is your operating? How do you get new sales? And how do you do customer support? And you might think that everybody knows how, but when you put the people all in the same room, they'd say, well, that's how we do it, but that's not how we should do it. Almost always, right? And so redesigning those pieces, building your business model as a small company, step by step, and everybody needs to know exactly what's the main thing to get done, who does it, how does it get done. It doesn't come from corporate, from Accenture, and thrown down at them. It gets done through a facilitated conversation where everybody agrees how they will work together, and it's documented, just like we did in Europe.
Yeah. Two names come to mind. There's thousands over the course of history, but General Patton and Bill Belichick.
Okay.
My guess is they follow, whether it's just naturally in their brains or, through their coaching and training, these common sense approaches.
An operating model. They have an operating model. Bill Belichick knows exactly how he does recruiting, exactly how he does training, and everybody knows it. And that's why he's great. That's every company. I don't care if it's 5 people or 1,500 people need to have that operating model documented. Because if it's not documented, you can't improve it, right? You can't teach it, and you can't improve it. Yeah. So, yeah. So you're right. I 100%, I believe that.
And he probably has, I doubt he has a computer dashboard or anything. It's probably just in his brain. Is my wide receivers coach the best in the NFL? Is my running backs coach the best in
Absolutely. Absolutely. So years ago, we did, in 1993, a study with the Green Bay Packers. I was a young guy, one of my first projects out of graduate school. We had a young MBA from Kellogg, another young MBA from Kellogg, and me. And the partner walks in the door and he says, thanks for coming today. I've just sold a project to the president of the Green Bay Packers, Bob Harlan, and we are going to rebuild the Packers dynasty. We're like, what? What? And he says, if you think about it, a pro football team is a stadium and people. And they have recruiting, they have selection, they have teaming, they have performance management, compensation, right? Yep. That's it. And so, we're the experts in this, so let's go do it. And he says, now I got to catch a plane, so you guys figure it out and let me know. And he leaves. And we sit there going, what are we going to do? And we thought, we don't know what to do, but somebody knows what to do. Who knows what to do? Well, Bill Walsh knows what to do. Let's interview him. Pete Rozelle knows what to do. Let's interview him. Bud Selig, David Stern of the NBA, Tex Schramm of the Dallas Cowboys. The people who have built dynasties, they know what to do. Let's just ask them. And again, we're taking each puzzle piece and we're putting it together. And at the end, it was really pretty clear. Here are the 5 critical success factors. Here's where you are. Here's where you need to be. Here's what the gap is. And the first thing that you need to do is you need to, Bill Walsh, the reason that made me think about this, Bill Walsh says, I see my team in, 8 positions? Something like that. 8 positions, like linebackers and running backs, et cetera, right? And at the end of year 1, I'm going to be the best in the world in 2 positions. Yeah, it was 8 positions. And at the end of, and I don't care about winning and losing. And at the end of year 2, I'm going to be the best in the world in 4 positions. And I'm going to start to care. But year 4, I will have a dynasty. You see, they're working on critical success factors. They're working on human capital. Just as you're saying, do we have the best, linebacker coach and linebackers in the NFL? And that's all we're going to do. And what happens in large corporations, maybe small, I don't know, is, you put a person in, and it's 6 months later, and they're saying, oh, it was a turnaround. You haven't turned it around yet. Well, it's impossible. You can't turn around a football team in 1 year. Think of college football. You're recruiting them It's going to take 4 years for them to be seniors. You can't fire the coach after the first year so you manage capabilities as leading indicators and stop worrying about the win and loss, right? It's a combination. You certainly do have to win, but
yeah, sooner than later. But building blocks in a process.
So what happened in the Green Bay Packers? Well, we brought Holmgren in, who brought Favre in, because we found in our study that you have to have a player leader on offense and a player leader on defense. Reggie White was a player leader on defense. Favre was offense. And you need to give Holmgren enough time to build that thing, and he did, and they won the Super Bowl. And they were there for 3 or something Super Bowls. So it was a dramatic improvement.
Yeah, and they've maintained that.
Yeah, they're actually not bad still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, yeah, this has been fun and insightful, and probably a world that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it's part of their daily
very
lives.
Practical and for every company, isn't
Absolutely.
it? It really is, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Brad, for joining. Probably need to have you on again in 6 months, 12 months, and finish out this list of questions.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.